1,000 of y'all have been asking me if I was going to see this movie. I saw it. I saw Reagan. Let's talk about it. Directed by Sean McNamara, stars Dennis Quaid as Ronald Reagan and Penelope Ann Miller as Nancy Reagan. So this is both a biopic and an adaptation. It's based on the biography The Crusader. I forget the author's name. But this pretty much chronicles Reagan's life from early childhood to write about his Alzheimer's diagnosis. But the interesting thing about this movie is that it's told from the perspective of a Russian spy. Russian spy played by Jon Voight. Believe the dude's name was Victor Petrovich, if I remember correctly. At this point, I think it's safe for me to say the last good biopic that I watched was 2022's Elvis. Baz Luhrmann with Austin Butler and Tom Hanks. And the structure here is kind of similar in that we are, watching this movie about a man being told from the perspective of someone else. And what's interesting about this Reagan movie, though, which I think is cool, kind of Citizen Kane-y of them, is what this movie is about is not so much Reagan, but why the Soviet Union fell. That's what this movie is about, ultimately. But it's still a Ronald Reagan biopic, and this kind of has some of the same pitfalls that a lot of biopics have, especially lately. It's like, I don't know what, Hollywood can't seem to get it together. They can't figure out how to tell a real or true story, and that it's almost like they're trying to, smush a lifetime into a short amount of time, giving us, pieces and pockets of events instead of giving us this long, cohesive story. So the movie is kind of episodic, a little choppy. I wouldn't say it's excellent. It's decent, but yeah, that's bothered me. It always bothers me with biopics, where it's almost like we have to tell you every little detail about this person's life instead of focusing on one thing. Or in this case, because the movie really, I think, starts to get very good once we get into the presidency. That's where the story really begins to have its own kind of flow. But before that, it's just very expository. It's like we're leading up to this point. But I think if they had just focused on his presidency and then given us pieces of himself in that moment, in those moments, in those years, it would have been a lot better. But they obviously wanted to structure this story around the fall of the Soviet Union, which now it makes sense that they would start from beginning to end as to why they kept an eye on Ronald Reagan, why they thought he might be the one that would be a problem, and why ultimately he was the one that took them down. Now, as far as accuracy goes, I'm not all that well versed on Reagan's presidency, so I can't speak to that. That's for people much smarter than I am. But I think what bugs me a little bit about this is how hero worshipy it is, which, whatever. Obviously, there's a clear bias. We're dealing with people who love Ronald Reagan, who loved his presidency, and is being told with that bias. I wouldn't quite call this a Christian film, but it definitely has a Christian angle to it. I mean, if Kevin Sorbo is here, then Jesus is involved somewhere. Also, I really wish Hollywood would stop with this whole de-aging thing that they've been doing with a lot of actors. I know they did it with Samuel L. Jackson. It was weird in the Marvels. It's even weirder here because they do it with Dennis Quaid and they also do it with Jon Voight. Instead of getting actors who are younger than them, clearly, but bear a striking resemblance to, work through those younger years. Instead, they use makeup and CGI to de-age them. I don't like it. I especially don't like the way they did Jon Voight. That, for me, was a little distracting. Regardless of its flaws, there's clearly a purpose and a message behind this movie, and I think that's what's important. There are definitely themes, and this is where the whole Christian thing comes into play, but themes of, God's plan for your life, destiny, prophecy in a sense, what it means to walk in God's favor, what it means to honor the Lord, and what it means to honor the people around you, what it means to be a leader, a good husband. But also, I think this movie is a bit of an ode to America. This is the kind of movie I think America needs right now. We need a reminder, who we are and the role that we play on the global stage, how important we are on that global stage, and also what we're capable of and what our country is capable of, both domestically and internationally. So, this is one of those movies that you watch when you're feeling down and you need a pick me up. You need a reminder of why you love your country, if that makes sense. Now, as far as acting goes, Dennis Quaid is Dennis Quaid. I love Dennis Quaid. I think he had Reagan pretty much down, mannerisms and all. Nancy Reagan, though, she was such a lady. Such a lady. And I think Penelope Ann Miller does a great job portraying a devoted, strong, and incredible wife. Nancy Reagan has a legacy of her own, but the way she was devoted to her husband, the way she supported that man and lifted him up, it's incredible, timeless. I love that they captured that. I was wondering going into the movie how they were going to portray their marriage, because that's what people remember Nancy Reagan. I think what they remember her most for is just how much she loved her husband and how devoted she was to that man to the bitter end. Bitter because he died of Alzheimer's, and that's sad. But yeah, I love that they didn't just capture, Reagan the president, Reagan the actor, but Reagan the husband and Nancy the incredible wife. There are pieces of this movie that are just very inspiring. I think that alone is worth a ticket. The movie as a whole is just okay. It has its issues. Do I think you'll care? I don't know. But I think you will enjoy the, red, white, and blue, these colors don't run spirit of it all. Not a bad way to end the month of August.